All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our March Legislative Action Committee. And we're glad to have you here. We are we've got a great group of people talking to you guys today. So we're going to get started right off the bat. And I want to welcome our Commissioner J. Ray Kennedy for the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. Let me read his bio to you. Ray Kennedy has worked in the field of international electoral assistance since 1990, leading large and small teams in design and implementation of electoral assistance projects, observing elections, planning, managing election activities, mentoring election observer groups, training election staff and political party agents, drafting election laws and regulations, and serving on election commission. He worked at the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, IFES, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., initially managing IFES projects in the Americas and later, leading IFES's working in collecting, organization, disseminating information on elections and citizen participation through the world, including IFES roles in launching the ACE project, an online encyclopedia and election administration. Since receiving his PhD in Latin American Studies from Johns Hopkins/SAIS, he has worked primarily as a senior electoral expert in the United Nations system. He has also collaborated with the Carter Center Democracy Program. In parallel, he has been working for more than a decade to promote awareness and implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, advising local groups in several countries, as well as the Voting Accessibility Advisory Committee in the Riverside County of California. Mr. Kennedy is registered with the Democratic Party. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and Commissioner Kennedy, we're gonna turn this over to you. I wanna let everybody know if you have any questions, please private chat me. And at the end of his presentation, I will read those questions to the commissioner. Go ahead and take it away, Commissioner Kennedy.
Very good. Thank you all for inviting the California Citizens Redistricting Commission to present at your meeting. I'm one of the 14 commissioners selected to draw the new electoral districts following the 2020 census. But before I begin with the presentation, I just wanted to add on just a little bit to the bio. I moved to Morongo Valley a year ago after living in Palm Springs for 15 years, but I also have a family connection to the high desert. My uncle, my father's younger brother, lived and worked in Apple Valley for a number of years in the 1960s. He actually worked at the Apple Valley Inn. He was in the hospitality business. So it's a special pleasure to be speaking to the High Desert Chamber this morning. What we're going to do in the Redistricting Basics presentation is go over who the commission is, what we do, and how you can get involved in the process. Next slide. The one thing that I have to ask, as a friendly reminder, California Government Code Section 8253, subsection 3 strictly forbids commissioners and staff from taking public input outside of a regularly scheduled commission meeting or official public input meeting. So I can't take any public input. I can answer questions about the presentation, but I cannot take public input. You can at any point visit our website, wedrawthelinesca.org, to provide input. There are also instructions on how to provide input by email, by snail mail, etc. But please, no attempts at public input as far as district lines this morning. Next. So what is redistricting? We're trying to make this interesting, but also easy enough for folks to understand. Redistricting is defined as drawing new boundaries that determine which Californians are represented by each elected official. So the census happens once every 10 years. The census leads to redistricting. Redistricting leads to changes in representation that last for 10 years, and then we start the process all over again. Next slide. Why we redraw district lines? Well, why do we have to do this every 10 years? A lot changes over the course of 10 years. Communities change in their priorities, their interests, their goals, and even the makeup of a community. People are born, people die, people move, both within California and out of and into California. Communities grow and shrink as a result. And areas where there were once roughly the same number of people become unequal. And so as communities change, the districts need to be updated to reflect those changes. Next. One of the greatest powers that the people of California have is electing their own representatives to conduct the business of their government. How the district boundaries are configured can make the difference between empowering and maximizing voters' voices or minimizing and muting those voices. In most other states, politicians redraw districts and often end up drawing safe districts for themselves to allow them to stay in office. By fully participating in and monitoring the upcoming redistricting process, more communities may have the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. Next. So the road to fair representation starts, as I mentioned earlier, with the census. U.S. Constitution requires that every American receive as close to equal representation as possible in government. And as populations of electoral districts change over time, some people are overrepresented, some are underrepresented. Redistricting evens out the population between districts. After the federal government publishes updated census information, California has to redraw the boundaries of its congressional, state senate, state assembly, and state board of equalization districts so that the districts correctly reflect the latest count of the state's population. At the federal level, reapportionment also takes place every 10 years. Reapportionment is reallocating U.S. House seats among the states. After every census, this is done to help ensure that seats are held by states in proportion to the size of their population. California currently has 53 seats. There's been a lot of speculation. We don't know exactly how many seats we will have. We should be getting those numbers by the end of next month. Next slide. Now, this is kind of the heart of the matter. The California Constitution, as a result of citizens' initiatives in 2008 and 2010, established very strict line drawing criteria. And these are the 6 criteria that we have to follow, and we have to actually follow them in this order when drawing district maps. So first of all, equal population. Districts must be of nearly equal population to comply with the US Constitution. Number 2, Voting Rights Act. Districts have to comply with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair chance to elect representatives of their choice. Number 3, contiguity. Districts have to be drawn contiguously, which means basically that all parts of a district have to be connected to each other. You can't be required to go out of the district in order to get back into some isolated part of the district. It all has to connect physically. Number 4, and this is the heart of the matter, communities of interest. Districts have to be drawn in a way that minimizes the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. And you'll notice that all 4 of these, cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest, are in the same criterion. So technically, at least, there is no priority given to say, keeping a county whole versus keeping a community of interest whole, or keeping a neighborhood whole versus keeping a city whole. But all four of those are ranked equally in the line drawing criteria. Number 5, geographically compact. Districts should be drawn so that nearby areas of population are not bypassed for more distant populations. Now, notice that geographically compact is number 5. So before we consider number 5, we have to be considering number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 before we get to number 5. And finally, nesting, where practicable. And by the time we get to criterion 6, we don't know how practicable any of this would be. But each Senate district should be comprised of 2 complete and adjacent assembly districts, and Board of Equalization districts, since there are only 4 of them, should be comprised of 10 complete and adjacent state Senate districts. There are 2 other provisions in the Constitution. One is the place of residence of any incumbent or political candidate cannot be considered in the creation of a map. And the other one is that districts may not be drawn for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent political candidate or political party. So pretty tall order, pretty specific, and we will have something on the order of 175 to 177 different districts to draw, keeping all of these things in order. Next slide. We are but one of many redistricting efforts occurring in California. The commission is redrawing districts for state offices, while counties, cities, school districts, water districts, community college districts, special districts, all sorts of districts are also redrawing their districts at the same time. And we wanted to highlight this because different efforts are happening simultaneously, and we don't want people to be confused. We will do our best if someone contacts us and it turns out that what they really want to be talking about is County Board of Supervisors redistricting or City Council redistricting. We will try to help connect them with the correct redistricting body. And likewise, we're going to be working with those local bodies so that if someone contacts them and actually wants to be talking about state level redistricting, they will put the person in touch with us. We're just trying to minimize confusion in this area. And we encourage people to be involved in all of these efforts. Just realize that we're not responsible for all of these different efforts. We're responsible for congressional, state Senate, state Assembly, and state Board of Equalization redistricting. Next slide. Just by way of history, before 2010 in California, legislators drew the lines. And if they didn't manage to do it on time, or if someone filed suit saying they didn't do it right, the courts did it. Proposition 11 in 2008, the Voters First Act, established the California Citizens Redistricting Commission to draw lines for state bodies, for state Senate, state Assembly, and Board of Equalization. And it was so well received, I guess, that in 2010, there was a further proposition, Proposition 20, the Voters First Act for Congress, that added the drawing of congressional districts to the tasking of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. So in 2010, the 2010 Redistricting Commission was established as California's first independent citizens redistricting commission. They held office until last year. I believe they held their last meeting in June of 2020. And then the 2020 commission took office in July and August of 2020. California wasn't the first state to have a citizens redistricting commission. Arizona was. But since Arizona in 2000 and California in 2010 Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, Montana, and Washington have added independent commissions, and other states are in the process of discussing establishing independent citizens redistricting commissions. Next slide. So the selection process actually started in 2019, and there were over 20,000 people statewide who filed initial applications. Those were screened for basic eligibility and conflicts of interest, and then people were invited to submit supplemental applications, which involved essay questions and a lot more detail. And there were over 2,000 supplemental applications. The state auditor, California State Auditor's Office, set up an applicant review panel to review those applications and to narrow the field down to 120 applicants that were invited to interview with the applicant review panel. After those interviews, which were March and April of last year, the applicant review panel narrowed the field to 60, and that's 20 Democrats, 20 Republicans, 20 others, to send to the legislature for review. The legislative leaders, Democratic and Republican leaders in both the state Senate and state assembly, had the opportunity to strike 2 persons from each pool, each person. That comes out to 12 strikes per each party, leaving 36 people who would go into a lottery draw. And the lottery draw was held on July 2nd last year to select 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 2 others. So 8 members initially selected by lottery. I was one of the so-called lucky ones, and I was chosen in that lottery. The 8 of us then met and reviewed the applications of all of the remaining individuals in the 3 different pools, and we selected the final 6, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 2 others, to make up the 14 member commission. We took into account political party, geography, race, gender, expertise, and I think we came up with a really good commission. Next slide. So this is the 2020 California Citizens Redistricting Commission. 14 members, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, 4 others. We are diverse in geography. We are diverse in opinions and expertise. There are 7 from Northern California, 7 from Southern California. There are 8 women, 6 men. We range in age from 30s to 60s. We have NGO leaders, engineers, pastors, law enforcement officers, political scientists, and 1 lawyer, and public servants. So we're happy to have people join us at our meetings. Our meetings are currently streamed online. If you go to our website, under the meetings tab, there's a link to join the meetings. There's a calendar of our meetings. And we'd be happy to see any and all of you attending our meetings. Next slide. To facilitate our outreach work, we've divided the state into 11 outreach zones. These are loosely based on the zones that the California Complete Count Office established for promoting involvement in the census last year. We're trying to build on some of the efforts of California Complete Count as far as outreach into communities around the state. You'll see that Riverside and San Bernardino are Zone I. I'm the lead commissioner for outreach in Zone I. So I'm busy building a profile of our 2 counties and reaching out to groups throughout the 2 counties. We're more than happy to set up additional presentations if any of you belong to other groups and those other groups are interested in having this presentation. We'd be happy to set that up. We are also in the process of putting out a video version of the presentation, and that will soon be available for groups that prefer that option. Next slide. So going back to the concept of communities of interest, this really is one of the most fundamental concepts in the process of citizen redistricting. We want to understand what communities of interest exist in California. Community of interest is defined as a concentrated population that shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. So it's important to note that a community of interest is not a district. A district is not a community of interest. Communities of interest are building blocks that we will be using when we build the districts. So some of the examples of what constitutes a community of interest, they can be cultural communities of interest. They can be areas in which people share similar living standards, use the same transportation facilities and means, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same media. And if you look through this list, it should be clear that people can belong to multiple communities of interest. It's easy for us to get information on what city boundaries are, what county boundaries are, but when it comes to neighborhoods and particularly communities of interest, we need input from the people of California to tell us what communities of interest they belong to and where those communities of interest lie. We'll have more on that coming up. Next slide. These are the different ways of providing public input. The statewide database at University of California at Berkeley received funding from the legislature to develop a nifty new input tool for us. It is called the Communities of Interest Mapping Tool. It is currently live. It is where the statewide database is working on translating the user interface and user manual and tutorial, so forth, into a variety of languages. So right now it is available in English, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. And we have almost a dozen more languages that they're working on that will be implemented progressively. The mapping tool can be found directly at drawmycacommunity.org. There are also links to that mapping tool on our website. Our website is wedrawthelinesca.org. Individuals can also provide public input by email through the Voters First Act at crc.ca.gov email address, or by mail at California Citizens Redistricting Commission, 721 Capitol Mall, Suite 260, Sacramento, California, 95814. We are working on an actual paper form. It might end up looking roughly like the old paper voter registration form that we will have placed in locations around the state. People who prefer to provide their input on paper, we wanted to provide a paper form as well. So there are a number of ways to provide public input, and we are encouraging people to do so. Next slide. One of the other things that we really need everyone to be aware of is the California State Supreme Court ruling in July of last year in the case of Legislature versus Alex Padilla, who at that point was Secretary of State. A number of legislators and community groups foresaw last year in the middle of the pandemic that the Census Bureau would have difficulty in getting census results to us in a timely manner. So the California state constitution stipulates that the commission should submit its final maps to the Secretary of State no later than August 15th. And folks last year were already seeing that we might not even have the data by August 15th. So that would clearly have created a crisis. And with great forethought, the legislature sued the Secretary of State to allow the commission to submit final maps up to December 15th. So a 4-month delay was foreseen. And there is an additional element in the Supreme Court's ruling. So the Supreme Court ruled on July 17 last year that the commission should have until December 15th of this year to submit its maps to the Secretary of State due to the delay in release of census results. And if the census results are received by the state after July 31st this year, the commission's deadline would be extended on a day-for-day basis beyond December 15th. Well, last month, I guess it was, the Bureau of the Census announced that it anticipated providing the census data to the states by September 30th. So September 30th is approximately 2 months after July 31st. And also, even with the December 15th deadline, getting data on the state receiving data on September 30th doesn't mean that we immediately have the data for our use. The data, there's still work to be done with the data by the statewide database. So we anticipate receiving the data on or about October 31st. Well, according to the timeline for final maps that would be submitted on December 15th, we would have to put out our first draft maps, I believe, the day after we receive the data, and that's not going to happen. So we are relying on this provision in the state Supreme Court ruling, giving us 1 day for each day beyond July 31st that the state receives the census results. I will say that we are in contact with the legislature and others to both understand and minimize the impact of this delay on the 2022 elections. I mean, given my background in election administration, my first thought was, okay, what is not just the date of the elections in 2022, but what are the key milestone dates leading up to the elections in 2022, and how might the delay in the release of the maps affect the early stages of preparation for the 2022 elections? So as I say, we are working with the legislature and with election officials statewide to understand and minimize the impact of any delay on the 2022 elections. Next slide. So our rough timeline, and this is being adjusted as we go along, as we learn new facts and face new realities. So beginning in February and extending at least through May, we will be having these California Redistricting Basics presentations to groups throughout the state. Anyone who wants a presentation can go on our website. There's a speaker request form. They can request one of these presentations. Starting in June, going through October, we anticipate having actual public input meetings. And these will be where community members can actually provide us with input verbally. Some of these may be live, depending on if and when the governor lifts orders limiting public events. So those would be from June through October. Now, as I mentioned, we anticipate the census data reaching the state on or around September 30th. And we anticipate receiving the census data from the statewide database on or around October 31st. So then once we have the census data, we would actually go into further public input meetings that are actually line drawing sessions with our contracted line drawers to develop the preliminary district maps. I anticipate that we would release the first draft district maps at some point in December. Once those are released, there is a 14-day hold. We cannot do anything to those maps during that 14-day period. That is for the public to have adequate time to review the maps and develop whatever comments they want to provide. In January, after that 14-day period, we would go back into public input meetings and further line drawing sessions to come up with our final maps. We would anticipate at this point having final maps at some point in early February, voting on those and submitting them to the Secretary of State. The maps have to be approved by a special majority of the commission. It's not just a simple majority. It requires 3 members from each of the 3 pools to approve the maps. So 2010 maps were approved by most, but not all of the commissioners. We anticipate that we will be able to approve a set of maps by the deadline as we get up to it. So next slide. Just a final reminder, in accordance with California Government Code, we cannot communicate with or receive communications about redistricting matters from anyone outside of a public hearing. The commission is not taking any public input during these educational presentations. To provide input, please visit our website, wedrawthelinesca.org. Next slide. If anyone wants to request a session for another group, please contact us. Our mailing address, our phone number. Marcy Kaplan is our outreach manager. Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y .Kaplan, K-A-P-L-A-N @crc.ca.gov. We'll be happy to work with anyone to set up another session. And we encourage everyone to follow our website, wedrawthelinesca.org. We're also on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, at We Draw the Lines CA. So thank you very much. And I hope this has been useful, and I'll look to Shannon to see if anyone has had any questions during the course of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. And yes, I do have a few questions that have come in. So the first one is, how do you plan to do outreach meetings in Zoom or in person?
At this point, all of the educational presentations are being done by Zoom. We met earlier this week and our executive director informed us and informed the public that they are beginning to revise the budget and looking at holding maybe half of the public input meetings face-to-face. Again, this all depends on public health orders, but we do anticipate that particularly by the time we reach September, October, we might be able to have in-person public input sessions.
Okay, thank you. Next question that came over is, I looked on your website and saw minutes from your meetings, but was wondering when you will post minutes or transcripts of your committee meetings.
That one I don't have an answer for.
Okay, all right. Next question was, as a resident of this area, I am curious, do you consider the high desert area of San Bernardino more to be part of the high desert community of interest or more as part of San Bernardino County?
This is, one of those instances where we are looking to the community to tell us what they think. And then based on the input that we receive from communities throughout the states, that is one of the main inputs in our work once we get down to drawing actual districts.
Okay, so then would people do that in the form of letters to you or coming to the meetings?
Letters, attending these public input meetings. We have the community of interest online tool that I mentioned that UC Berkeley, the statewide database at UC Berkeley has set up for us. And eventually the paper communities of interest form that we will be distributing to locations around the state. So there are a number of ways. We just want to make it as easy as possible for people throughout the state to communicate with us. If they don't have broadband, if they're uncomfortable doing this with the online mapping tool, we're hoping to have these paper input forms at libraries, maybe post offices, and maybe other locations throughout the state. So people would be able to find a paper form to draw their own hand-drawn map on, and it'll have business reply permit number on it. So people just fold it, tape it, drop it in the mail, and it should reach us.
Okay, all right, good. Let me look here. Next question is, what is different from your process this time as opposed to the last commission?
Well, the biggest difference is the timeline. The 2010 commission was formed much later. They held their first meeting, I believe, in January of 2011. And they received their census data on time. So I believe that was around the end of March. So there had never been an independent citizens redistricting commission in California. So they characterize it as building the airplane as they're already rolling down the runway. And they had very little time to do that. We have had more time. I personally feel that it may be useful for the commission to have even more time in the future because getting a commission set up from scratch is not an easy thing to do. We have had staff to hire, we have had procurement actions to take, we have had to put policies in place. All of that takes time. And then, on the back end, the census delays have given us much more time than the 2010 commission. The 2010 commission basically collapsed everything into pretty much the public outreach, public input sessions, did education at the public input sessions, and just in general had much less time to reach out to the state and educate Californians on what redistricting is, how it's done, who the commission is, and how to get involved in the process. So we are trying to make best use of the time available to us by having more time on the front end and more time on the back end to really educate and encourage people throughout the state to participate in this process.
All right, good. Let me look here. I think we've got a couple more questions. The next one was, what is the state doing with the numbers from September 30th to October 31st?
Okay, so the statewide database is going to be responsible for that. I don't have all of the details, but one of the main things that they are going to be doing, there is now a law on the books that allows the commission to reallocate the incarcerated population. So we have, in accordance with that law, we have asked statewide database to reallocate individuals who are in the California corrections system from where they are held to their community of origin. And so the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation will be providing the statewide database with the data that they have on where individuals in the correctional system come from. Statewide database will then be moving those people from where they are held, which is where the census counted them, to their community of origin, which is where we want them for purposes of representation. A lot of these people will no longer be in the correctional system at some point during the 10-year period that these districts will be in effect, and we want them to be represented in their communities of origin rather than where they are currently held. All right.
I think I got a couple more here. Sometimes we're afraid we're not going to get any questions for you guys, and then we get a bunch. So this is good. Let's see. The next one is, what company is drawing the lines and how were they chosen?
There was an open bidding process for this. And, I will say that, every state in the country is looking for line drawers at this point. And as I mentioned, there are many different redistricting processes going on in California, counties, cities, school districts, community college districts, et cetera. So there is enormous demand for line drawers at this point. Okay. We ended up with one bidder. Last time, I believe they had two bidders. But it was an open process. It was widely publicized. It's actually a consortium of groups. Q2, which is the group that drew that worked with the commission last time, is I believe the lead in the consortium. There's another company called Haystack, Haystaq, that is also part of the consortium. And again, I want to highlight that they are on contract to help us. The commissioners make the final decisions as to where the lines go, not the contract.
Okay, got it. And then the very last question was, I read something about the grants the commission is doing. What is the situation with your grant process, and do you have the authority to do this?
We are still looking into that, so please stay tuned.
Okay, got it. All right, I don't see any other questions that have come in. We want to thank you very, very much. It was a very good presentation. There's lots of interest, obviously, out there in this process. And thank you very much for joining us today.
You're certainly welcome. And again, if anyone has questions, please feel free to direct them to the Voters First Act at crc.ca.gov email, or if there is interest in scheduling a presentation, you can either go online to our website and find the speaker request form, or just email marcy.kaplan@crc.ca.gov directly, and she will help set that up. So thank you all very much. Have a great day.
All right. Okay. And I do believe that the San Bernardino County is looking for commissioners for their redistricting process too. The deadline will be April 5th to apply. So that's separate, but just want to throw that out there to everybody that's on the ledge call today. So anyway, thank you again, Commissioner, and we really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks.
All right, okay, we're going to move right into, I'm going to, Marshall Hoprov, who is our chairman of the board, but is also the communication specialist, will be introducing our next speaker.
Well, good morning. I'm not quite the chairman just yet, chair-elect of the Greater High Desert Chamber of Commerce.
I'm moving into the future already, sorry.
It's all good. Yeah, and I am the communication specialist for the Mojave Desert Air Quality Management District. And we are fortunate to have joining us this morning to talk a little bit about air quality regulations, and specifically legislation that is coming or could be coming this year in California. Our air pollution control officer and executive director, Brad Poiriez. Good morning, Brad.
Hey, good morning, Marshall. Mark, Shannon, thanks for the invitation today too to speak with you guys. I know, and that's a tough act to follow, the commissioner on his informative presentation, but I'll do my best, and I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. When we start talking about legislative bills and the action that's going on at the legislature right now, it's pretty fast and furious what's going on up there. But just for some quick background, I am the executive director here at Mojave Desert AQMD and have been for approximately 5 years now. But I also sit on my state association's board of directors, and I have for over 15 years. That's CAPCOA, the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association. It's made up of all 35 air districts throughout the state of California. And we here at Mojave, our jurisdiction is the second largest landmass of all the air districts, second only behind San Joaquin. We're over 20,000 square miles. And so we do cover the whole high desert up here. I have, with that designation of being on the board of directors, I get the dubious task of being on the legislative committee as well. And this time of the year, bills are introduced. There's a whole lot of gutting them in that's going on at the Capitol right now, and it's difficult to keep track of everything that's going on. But currently, my state association is tracking about 100 different pieces of legislation that have air quality impacts one way or the other, meaning it could be policy setting, it could be regulatory setting, or it could be financial incentives, budgeting issues that could impact not only the air districts, but the sources that we also represent. So we're representing not only the public and the communities we serve, but we're also representing some of our industry that could be impacted by the proposed legislation. And the state association does have a state lobbyist that tracks a lot of this, but here at Mojave Desert, we have our own legislative consultants that helps me and helps my board keep a finger on the pulse of legislation that may impact our businesses up here in the high desert from an air quality perspective. And I want to make sure everyone understands that I'm talking strictly from the air quality perspective here, because a lot of these pieces of legislation morph over into something entirely different after they've been introduced. And so I was going to touch on 5 or 6 bills that are currently introduced, going through the committee processes right now. And a lot of people probably have heard or read in the paper or online about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. That's the big auction that happens quarterly at the state level that brings in, roughly $1 billion a quarter. And those funds, the governor and the legislature has determined how those allocations and those expenditures will be set. One of the biggest and probably most controversial expenditure of those funds is the high-speed rail. Not to be confused with the Bright Line. This is a different high-speed rail project that's been going on for the past 12 years. The quote-unquote boondoggle of the state, spending a lot of money on a train to nowhere. There are some bills being introduced, AB 5 by Fong, that would suspend the 25% earmark of those funds going to the high-speed rail authority and reallocating those to the general fund of the legislature to be used elsewhere. Obviously, that's concerning to air districts, because if those funds go into the general fund, how they're going to be reallocated is a concern, because they should be reallocated to air quality reduction programs. Some of those programs that we benefit from are like the Carl Moore program, which is an incentive program that here in the high desert, Mojave Desert AQMD has given out over $20 million in grant funds over the 20 plus years that's been in effect. And those incentive dollars go directly to our businesses and local entities that apply and do emission reduction projects. So that's a high concern of ours whenever somebody's introducing legislation that could eventually impact the local district getting funds that we in turn give out to our local businesses is concerning. So we're tracking that one. Again, we're early in the session on this. We also track what other air districts are doing. For example, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has an AB 426 bill, which is an indirect source rule, which would give them the authority to gather information of toxics information on mobile emissions that go into a stationary source. Now, as a local entity, our jurisdiction stops with stationary sources. We have no control over mobile emissions. That's a state responsibility. So we're tracking that, and why we track that is because many of you know this, and your chamber probably knows the same thing. If the legislature approves some piece of legislation that's effective only in one portion of the state, eventually another legislator is going to come on board and say, well, if they can do it up there, they can do it, over here. And so we're always concerned with what other air districts are doing and legislation that they're supporting. So we're tracking that one too. And many of you that follow the happenings that's going on down in the Inland Empire and down in the South Coast area, they're getting ready to take a vote, probably it may be pushed out till May now, that is also, it's called a warehouse indirect source fee that they're looking at imposing, which could have an impact up here in the high desert for a couple of different reasons. One being that some of those warehousing entities may be looking to relocate to remove themselves from an arduous fee or further regulation. That happens across the board with or without this particular fee that they're thinking about proposing. Here in the high desert, we're fortunate enough that our air quality is better than it is down the hill. That means that our rules and regulations are less stringent, which is beneficial to companies that are located up here. It means that maybe they don't have to spend as much money on much more stringent control measures and things like that. So there is a benefit for, and we promote this in the High Desert Opportunity and others, that, we're more business friendly. We're trying to find that balance between our role in regulating sources of air pollution as well as cleaning the air for the citizens. So there's a fine balance there. So we're tracking all those different types of legislation or impacting politics that might be happening outside our area for the benefit of the high desert. Another one we're tracking is AB 1205, which would require all the State Air Resources Board members to be elected instead of appointed right now. The reason that's important to us, because we're very fortunate here at Mojave. One of our board members, Miss Barbara Reardon, also sits on the State Air Resources Board of Directors. So she's the de facto representative for basically about 30 of the 35 air districts, the rural and medium-sized districts. So we have a direct pipeline into policy that's being discussed at the state level, as well as at the legislature. So if it were to go as presented right now, it would go to an election of those. And we're fearful that urban areas, we will get outvoted by urban areas on putting someone else on the board that we would have to rely on to represent us that may not have our best interests at heart. So we're tracking that one. I'm trying to go as quickly as I can. And another thing is, I mentioned the budget. So we track the governor's budget just like all of you, I'm sure. There is a provision in the proposed governor's budget right now that would extend the AB 8, which is the Carl Moyer program, which I mentioned earlier. It's an incentive fund program that we've been running for 23 years. It would extend that out to 2045. It's set to expire in 2023. There's bipartisan support for it. The program is well proven to get the emission reductions. It assists local businesses in retrofitting their fleets. We could use, tenfold money in that program. So we do get involved. My state association and the local districts do get involved with our local legislators and tell them why we believe they should support the governor's budgetary actions in this one particular. And we try to support him with our local legislatures and that effect. But I mean, everything's moving so quickly. Like I said, there's 100 bills, and I could go through about 10 more that are probably problematic in the current form, but chances are they're going to get amended. But I guess the message is we're fortunate here that we have representation at our state level, that we track some of this amazingly bad legislation as well as some good legislation that could impact the high desert, and make sure that we have our input to hopefully get amendments where we are not negatively impacted. So we'll continue to do that. If there's a piece of legislation that someone else, some other one of your members may have a different association that may be concerned with, it has an air quality component to it, they're more than welcome to reach out to us here at the local air district, and we can elevate those concerns. Be happy to do that. And I can answer any questions. I know I didn't have a lot of time, but hopefully that gives you just the 30,000 foot level as to one of the small little pieces of things we're doing here at Mojave Desert AQMD.
All right, thank you very much. I know Mark and I sit on a lot of legislative stuff, and phew, it's coming at you at warp speed. And so I appreciate you being able to bring some of that to us. So I don't have any questions, but people can reach out to you or reach out to Marshall or reach out to Ryan if they do have questions. No problem there.
Great. Thank you again.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, everybody, if you can, we're kind of pushing our time just a little bit, but we'd like to have Don Brown come on. He is the president and broker of Lee & Associates here in Victorville. There were some questions that came up last time that he had reached out to people individually to answer, but we'd like to have Don come on and give us a little overview.
Well, thank you, Shannon. I'm going to do the same thing that Brad talked about. I'm going to give you a kind of a view from 500 feet. I'm going to touch on California Association of Realtor issues that they're dealing with. There's a lot of really great people on the call this morning that are very knowledgeable as far as local politics are concerned, and I will defer to them to be the experts in that field. I currently serve as a legislative and governmental relations chair for the High Desert Association of Realtors, and in the same capacity for the Institute of Real Estate Management, Chapter 106 for Riverside and San Bernardino. In that capacity, we have committees just like we have here that discuss these issues and try to address those things that are coming at us as a trade organization, and try to, of course, counsel our elected officials on the error of their ways in some cases, and to provide input in a constructive manner to where we can try to help perhaps prevent the average citizen from getting hit with some things that could be very negative in relation to their maybe buying a home or renting a commercial space or whatever. I'm going to touch base on our last election. A lot of you may or may not remember some of the propositions. I'll do it real quick. We had propositions 14 through 25. I'm going to touch base on just those that impacted real estate at a state level only. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Shannon will take care of that. Or you can reach out to me at my email, which is dbrown@lee-associates or -.com. lee-associates.com. Don Brown. So anyway, let's talk about probably one of the biggest issues that we had in the last election, and that was Prop 15. That was the split property tax roll that a lot of you were aware of. And a lot of you say, well, what the heck was that, Don? Well, that would have basically, over a period of a couple of years, it would have been implemented over a couple of years, but the impact would have been the same. It was going to be the reassessment of commercial property every couple of years. So there would have been no protection under Proposition 13, where they could only adjust the value of your property after you bought it by the traditional 2%, which is currently law in the state of California, and one of the few laws that is favorable towards real estate. So when we looked at it, it was talked about that it was going to be for schools and all this. And when you dug into it, CAR found out that a lot of money was being siphoned off to other issues, which we see to be very common at the state level. And a lot of the things that are being presented in the summaries and the narratives are not exactly accurate. So CAR went ahead and rallied the troops, so to speak, and we were successful in defeating that proposition. Now, let me tell you what would have happened had that been successful. The increase in our property taxes would have ultimately been passed on to our tenants in all of our properties. Landlords are pretty benevolent folks, but they're not going to absorb these tremendous tax increases. So they would have been passed on in the way of increased rents. This would have been devastating for a lot of our small business people. And a lot of them right now after COVID have been hanging on by a thread. And of course, landlords have not gotten a lot of relief from the state as far as any kind of forbearance or deferment of mortgages. We've still had to make mortgage payments. The tenants have gotten some relief. I'll touch on the extension to the eviction moratorium, which is the executive order N0321, and that's been extended to June 30th, 2021. So on residential, the eviction moratorium has been extended. There are a lot of caveats to that moratorium. I'm not going to get into it now. I don't have enough time. Commercial in San Bernardino County does not have the same restrictions. We can go ahead and evict tenants that are not paying unless they can prove what is called a COVID defense. They have to show that their business was negatively impacted by the executive orders affecting the COVID pandemic. And they have to provide us with that information within 60 days of the executive orders going down. We found a lot of tenants did not do that, but we're working diligently with all those tenants to work out payment arrangements for them, and in some cases, some forgiveness of rent if they were legitimately closed. The next proposition I'm going to touch on that would be affected by California Association of Realtors was Proposition 19. That was, in a nutshell, basically regarding senior housing, to where seniors could transfer their tax bases to other properties. This bill or this proposition is going to probably still need some more work. It didn't quite come out like it was supposed to. It ended up in its final form amending Article 8 of the California Constitution. And as part of that measure, children who inherit their parents' houses will no longer receive a property tax break if they intend to keep it as a second home or rent it out. Okay, so I don't know if that was the intent of Prop 19, because Joel Singer and our CAR board in Sacramento did endorse this, and I'm not sure they quite had it all together, or maybe they did, I don't know. Previously, transfers of principal residence of a parent up to $1 million of the assessed value of the property passed to children without being reassessed for local county property tax purposes, thereby preserving the benefits of Prop 13 for heirs and trust beneficiaries. That's kind of all I'm going to say about that, because there may be some opinions one way or another, but I think it's another example of some legislation that was pushed through that may have been in error. Prop 21, that expands government authority over rent control. That was defeated. That was a bad proposition from its inception, as evidenced by the large percentage that it was defeated by. This proposition would have had a huge impact on our multifamily sector and would have had a devastating blow overall to our industry. It looks like we dodged the silver bullet on that one, but we expect that group will be back for the next election cycle in 2022. Proposition 22, that was a proposition that was put together to counteract the negative effects of AB 5, which basically reclassified independent contractors as employees. Again, I don't know if this was some ill-conceived idea in Sacramento. I'm trying to be very fair about this, but it was pretty negative overall. This was a cleanup proposition that restored independent contractor status to some of the Uber and Lyft drivers. We have seen now the courts are starting to look at this, and as we have seen so often in the state of California, the electorate may pass a proposition or defeat a proposition only to see it reappear back in the courts with that group trying to overturn the decision of the electorate. So that has been of great concern, of course, to our association. This was of great concern to the California Association of Realtors, because they have been looking at trying to reclassify real estate agents who are traditionally 1099 employees and independent contractors to employees. I don't understand sometimes the rationale other than try to grab more tax revenue, but I can assure you every one of these people pay taxes on the same basis as everybody else. They have some perhaps more deductions because they're using their vehicle for business or their home, but all in all, they are taxpayers the same as all of us. There's another assembly bill that's floating around right now that you may be of interest of, and that's called Assembly Bill 1199. This is an excise tax on property owners for renting or leasing properties. This is a new bill that's being sponsored by Mike Gibson, an assemblyman out of Carson. This basically is saying that if you have an LLC or corporation and you are a property owner, if you want to maintain that ownership structure and not disclose who you are and the reporting requirements for qualified entities, then you're going to be hit with a tax that they are talking about. Now, when you read the bill, there's no amount in that tax, so we really don't know what he's asking for. We're not sure what's driving this. A lot of our owners really want to be anonymous. They don't want people knocking on their door, complaining about their rent or something along those lines. And I think as property owners, this is just my opinion, have a right to that anonymity. So this is something we're watching very closely and is kind of disturbing, as it is an assault on our private property rights and our right to own property without having the management companies having to deal with these issues and then having people going directly to owners. That's not why they hire management companies. Most of you that know me know we have a pretty substantial management company, and our people pay us to basically intervene on their behalf. If this is passed, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration would administer and collects the excise tax and would be able to adopt regulations to implement this law. The bill also specified that this excise tax cannot be passed through to tenants in the way of higher rents. So again, the landlords are going to have to pay another fee but there's no way to recapture this. So the attack on landlords is continuing, as I've said in other presentations that I've made, which is of great concern to us. The people that own most of the real estate that we handle and that I know some of my associates handle in their companies are hardworking people. They've worked hard to buy these properties and to fix them up and to keep them in good repair. And gosh, they sure didn't intend to have these kind of things coming at them. This has been a rough time for the last 12 months. Again, I will say that there has been no legislation that has been friendly towards landlords coming out of Sacramento. We have been left to our own devices to deal with our lenders, whether it be, again, forbearance or deferment in some way, shape, or form, or forgiveness of our mortgage payments. And we know of people that have lost properties during this period of time because tenants have not paid their rent. They say that there is landlord friendly legislation, but that is for 4 units and under. And it's basically targeted if you live in one of the units. So you're considered a small landlord at that point in time, or with single family houses. So I know our time is limited, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions that you may have. And if I can answer them, I will. If I can't, I will direct you to somebody that can.
All right, Don, thank you very much. I don't see any questions, but you did give your email address and everything else, so people can reach out to you directly on answers on that. I know we had some questions on the last legislative committee meeting, and we really wanted, to have you come back and do exactly what you just did.
Oh, good. All right. Yeah. Well, Mark has got the list of the propositions. I emailed that to him this morning, so you can get it from him, or you can get it from me. Again, my email is dbrown@lee-associates.com, all lowercase. Thank you, Shannon.
All right, thank you. And we want to thank everybody that joined us on the call today. We are having great turnouts on these, and it was an action-packed and lots of information filled event today. So thank you for being here and sharing your morning with us. Hopefully it didn't blow up your brains and gave you some extra information. Have a good rest of your Thursday.
Happy trails.
All right.
Everybody, thank you so much.